So far in this section, we learned a few important things. We learned how to create an HTML document, and we learned how to run a script by loading it into the document with a script tag. What we haven't talked about is how to combine the two. How to do something with the document inside of our JavaScript. For example, listening for a button click, reading the text value in an element, removing an element, or adding in a new one. All of these are things we can do inside of our browser JavaScript. So what we're going to focus on in this video is exploring something called the DOM, right here, DOM, and DOM stands for Document Object Model. So the document in DOM is the HTML document. The object in DOM is a JavaScript object. So we have an object in JavaScript that models our HTML document. That's all the DOM is. So if I wanted to find all of my paragraph elements and get all of their text and see if there are any bad words in any of them, I could use the DOM to do just that. If I wanted to listen for a input field's value to change, I could use the DOM to do that. If I wanted to delete every single form from a web page, I could use the DOM to get that done. Anytime we're using JavaScript to do something with our HTML, we're most likely going to be using the DOM. So we're going to kick things off by figuring out how we can perform some basic DOM manipulations. The first thing that we're going to try to do is delete one of the elements in our document from our JavaScript file. Now I mentioned that the document is modeled using a JavaScript object, and that object is called document. This is not an object that we create. It's an object provided to us by the browser. We can use document to perform all of those DOM manipulations. So if we were going to try to delete one of our elements, let's say this paragraph tag, for example, what would be the steps to get that done? Well, there are two steps. The first step is to get this element out of the document by querying it. So we're going to be able to search our document for various things. And the second step is what we want to do with the things we find. In this case, we want to remove them. In other cases, we might want to update them or replace them. For now, though, let's go ahead and start with step one. How do we query our document for the various things inside of it? I'm going to kick this off by using one method on document, a very popular one. This is .query selector. Query selector gets called with a single value, a string, and in here we define what we're looking for. In this case, we're looking for a paragraph tag. What we put inside of the quotes is actually the tag name. So here I'm going to put a P to match up with the P tag over here. Now what comes back from query selector is a representation of not the whole document, but a representation of just this element. It allows us to do specific things with it. The one we're going to do is remove it. So now what we need to do is just do something with the return value from query selector. Let's create a new variable, const p equals whatever comes back from query selector. And the next thing we're going to do is print it. So console.log p. Now at this point, we would expect p to equal something that we can maybe call some method on to remove the element. Let's go ahead and save Notes app and see exactly what we get. I'm going to save the file over in the browser. What do we get right here? We get null. So what's coming back from our console.log is actually null. It is not what we might have expected, some sort of object that we could use. Now what's happening here? Well, what's happening here has nothing to do with the contents of our JavaScript file. What's happening here has to do with how this document is set up. So this document is going to get parsed in order from top to bottom. When the browser sees this script tag, it's going to get that script and execute it. Now this script comes before these elements, which means that when this script executes, it's not going to have access to any of these elements. They haven't been parsed yet. So that's why when we actually run the script, we're seeing that there are no paragraph tags, even though clearly there are at some point. A common way to fix this is to restructure our HTML file. What we're going to do is take this script tag and cut it out. Then we're going to paste it at the very bottom of our body. So after everything that makes up the visible part of the page. Now moving the script tag down here is going to adjust the order. Now this script is going to run after all of our elements exist, and don't worry, this isn't going to affect what shows up to the screen. It's not going to show anything in the browser, the script tag is going to get parsed, and no content will actually be shown. So if we were to save the file in its current state, the visible rendered output is identical to what we had before. The only difference is that now we are getting something over here. I'm getting a little paragraph element, and if I highlight over it, you can see it actually shows me which paragraph I'm looking at. I'm looking at the one right here, the only one we have. If we were to expand this, we could view all of the things on that object. There are a whole bunch of pieces of information here. For example, we have something like the text content. This application was created by Andrew Mead. If we scroll down even more, we can get all sorts of information. Now, a lot of this information is stuff we're never going to use or stuff that's not really relevant for our purposes, but we're going to explore a few of these. And the first one we're going to explore is a method that just removes this paragraph altogether. Over inside of our JavaScript, let's go ahead and switch things up. No longer will we console.log p. Instead, we're going to use a method on p. So that's p dot, and the method is called remove. We can see it's getting auto-completed right here. When we call remove, we don't pass any arguments in. All it does is it removes the element selected. So right here, I have successfully removed the paragraph. When I go back to the browser, there's nothing showing up. If I were to switch up what we searched for, I would be removing something else. So I could remove the h1 by searching for the h1 tag instead, and right there we can see that gets removed, and the paragraph tag, which wasn't targeted, stays in place exactly as it was earlier. So this combination of querying the DOM and then using various methods is what we're going to do to manipulate our HTML from our JavaScript. And now let's take a look at a couple more use cases. So for example, I'm going to switch this back over to the paragraph, and we're going to add another paragraph into the file. I'm going to add one down below, p tag, some note text, for example. Now, when I save the HTML file and I save the notes app file, what we see is that only the first paragraph tag inside of our application was deleted. Some note text still shows up. So query selector, it matches the first match it finds. In this case, it matched the first paragraph tag. So let me leave a little note about this right here, query and remove. Down below, we're going to look at a different way to get this done. We're going to figure out how we can get all of the paragraph tags and remove all of them. Right here, query all and remove. To get this done, we're going to be using a similar method. So I'm going to call this one const p's, plural. We have multiple paragraphs, and we're going to set it equal to document dot query selector. But this time, instead of using query selector, we're going to use query selector all. The argument is going to be exactly the same. It's a string that defines what we're looking for. In this case, a paragraph. What comes back is different though. Instead of getting back a single node in your document, you get back a list of all of the nodes that match. So now we can use a method like for each to iterate over all of them, removing each one. Let's go ahead and do just that. To prevent confusion from the two, I'm going to comment out all of the lines above, meaning that if I were to save the file, none of the paragraphs get removed. Let's go ahead and delete all of them. Right here, PS stores this list of matching nodes. Dot for each allows us to iterate over each thing. We pass in our callback function. And just like we saw for arrays, we get access to the individual item. I could call that a P or paragraph, whatever I wanted to. Now inside of here, we can use remove, which we already explored, p.remove. So in this example, we're doing something a bit more complex. We're querying all of the paragraph tags, we're iterating over each one, and we're removing each one. So now instead of removing just the first one, like the code above did, we should see all of them get deleted. If I save the file, what happens? They all get wiped away. So being able to query for a single thing or for multiple things is really powerful. This is how we're going to be able to actually look at our document and do something meaningful. Now we're going to explore just one more thing we can do with our document. We're going to figure out how we can read text values. To get that done, let's go ahead and just print all of the paragraph text values. So that is p dot, and this time around, instead of using remove to remove the node, we're going to be using text content, which is a property, to read the value. So I could wrap this in parentheses, I could then toss a console.log up front, and the result should be that I go through each paragraph in the document and I print its text to the console. If I save things, we can see that the DOM wasn't manipulated in any way, which is correct. And if I look at the content in the console, I can see I am getting my messages. This application was created by Andrew Mead and some note text. Now, we can read the value off of text content, but we could also write it as well. So let me comment out this line and replace it with a different one. I'm going to use p.textContent, and I'm going to set that equal to a new string. So in this case, I'm actually going to be changing the value for each paragraph. Let's go ahead and change the value to the same thing for all of them. I'll just use a few asterisks. Maybe we're trying to censor all the content on the screen by replacing the real value. And if I were to save Notes app, what happens? It goes through all of the paragraphs and it updates their text content. So these are just a few of the common ways we can manipulate the DOM. Let's take a quick moment to recap what we learned. First up, we learned about the DOM, the document object model. This is an object called document, which models our HTML document. So if I ever want to read, write, or update the HTML from JavaScript, the DOM is the way to get that done. We looked at a few different DOM methods. In this example, we used query selector to find the first paragraph tag. This allowed us to use the remove method on that element to actually remove it. Down below, we used an alternative version, query selector all, to find all paragraph tags. We then used for each to do something for each paragraph. The first thing we did is we removed it with remove. The next thing we did was get its text content by reading the text content property. And the last thing we did was change the text content by setting the text content property equal to a new string. Now that we have all of this in place, we're going to move on to the challenge. The challenge is actually going to be a completely separate video. In the next one, you're going to be coming up with a basic setup, an HTML document, and some JavaScript for the to-do application. I'm excited to get to that, so let's go ahead and jump right in to the next one.